Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good evening. How are you doing? Today we're going to talk about setting goals. In particular, setting goals for learning English. Since we are coming up to the new year, and I wish you all have a happy new year, however you're celebrating today. There are many different traditions in the UK for celebrating the new year. But I'm not particularly doing any of them today, which has also become a tradition for celebrating the new year recently. People do nothing, which is a bit sad. However, my wife is Vietnamese, so we actually celebrate more the Chinese New Year in February, because that's very important for East Asian cultures. However, the New Year is often seen as a good time to think about where you are and where you are going. So that's what we are going to talk about today. Just check my setup a little bit. Think it'd be better if I go down here in the bottom left. So, thinking about your language learning goals, I first want to talk about habit versus fascination. And by fascination here, I don't just mean interest. Fascination can be another word for an interest. Actually, it often means a deep interest, something you have a focused interest in. However, here, I'm using fascination to mean something kind of temporary. A passing fascination with the idea that, oh, I'm interested in this and I'm going to focus on it right now. Passing fascinations can be fun. However, the point I want to make here is that language learning cannot be a passing fascination. Language learning takes a long time. And so I want to start by saying that you have to play the long game. Play the long game. So the average amount of time to go from beginner to an advanced user of a language is over 1,200 hours of dedicated study. Now, often these measures of study in language learning don't actually include practice outside of classroom. So when we say 1,200 hours of dedicated study, we're talking about things like this stream. We're not including the time you spend talking to people in English outside of class, which arguably is as important or more important than actually studying in class. If you watched the class from last month about the declarative procedural model, you'll know that the kind of practice where you're not thinking a lot consciously about language is very important if you want to get native-like fluency. So 1,200 hours of study. That's quite a lot. Likely, that's going to take years. So please, let's stop talking about learning English in 3 months and so on. That's not what we're about, and we don't want to pretend that that's the situation. Hello to Rand in the chat. Hello to Pavia. Hello to Julia. Hello to Daisy. And hello to Manuel. And hello to Sylvia. So play the long game. What we want to do actually is to think about language as a habit. And we want to approach this with a success mindset. Success mindset is what we can call a buzzword. That's B-U-Z-Z, buzzword. A buzzword is a phrase which gets used a lot, sounds very impressive, but often we don't really think enough about the meaning. So when I talk about a success mindset with language learning, what do I mean? Let's get specific. There are specific characteristics that we can associate with successful language learners. A successful language learner being someone who starts at a beginner level, goes through to advanced, and is satisfied with their language level to a point they can communicate with people in English and not really worry a lot about it. There's a number of things that we need to have as a learner when approaching a new language that will help with that. And I've got 4 characteristics here I want you to think about. The first one is the idea of growth. And by growth, I mean we're thinking of learning a language not only to improve our language ability, but also for the other benefits which we get from learning a language. And there are many. Answers in the chat if you know about any of the benefits you can get from learning a language. One of those is that you get to discover new things in the language you're learning, such as cultural knowledge about the place where the language is from. And this can become quite fascinating for people learning languages, and that's a good thing. When I learned Spanish, I started to learn a lot about Spanish culture, and I also learned how the language related to the culture, how certain things like politeness when eating is very important to the Spanish, and there's lots of vocabulary and phrases related to that. However, when talking to someone and making a request, often Spanish people will be very direct, and the language is set up for that. Give me a coffee. Put me a bag. Not like English, where we have these long sentences to express politeness. And I think that those features of the language are reflected in the culture. Another thing that's worth knowing about learning a language is the positive effect it has on your mind. Many people will tell you that the best time to learn a language is when you're young, because it's easier. And as I've talked about, this likely relates to the system of procedural memory in the mind, which is more effective when we're young. In fact, under the age of 6 is when it's most effective, procedural memory. And this allows unconscious acquisition of language quite rapidly. And it's true that procedural memory declines with age. Declines. Actually declines quite a lot by the time we're young adults. So in your 20s, your procedural memory is much lower than when you're 5 years old. So when we're 75, of course, our procedural memory is not what it once was. Nonetheless, there are benefits to learning a language when you're older. Significant benefits, in fact. Benefits which are not the same if you learn when you're a child. One of those benefits is the benefit on neuroplasticity. That is, how old is our mind? The ability of the mind, in fact, to learn new habits. We can call this neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity, in other words, is how easily can we change the mind? Learning a language as an adult has a positive effect on neuroplasticity. It keeps the brain more changeable. So if we don't want to get stuck in our ways when we get older, then learning a new language is a great thing to do. There's also some evidence that it helps with conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia. And of course, these are conditions which should concern us all as we get older. In other words, learning a language is much like exercise for the mind. And knowing those benefits is what I'm calling a growth mindset. So today we're going to talk about setting goals for learning languages. And currently I'm just starting with, this is our position right now, and this is how we position ourselves for success. And then we'll talk about setting goals and how to set goals. So next, curiosity. Curiosity is definitely the most important factor of motivation I see in students from 16 years of teaching. I'm going to have to change that soon, aren't I? In one day, I'm going to start saying 17 years. In fact, it's already been 17 years because I started teaching in September 2008. I'll have to update all of my information on the internet. So from that time, I will definitively say that curiosity is the most critical and useful component or part of motivation for language learners. Being curious about the language and being curious about things that you interact with or learn through the language is just so useful. You see a word, it looks a bit strange, you want to know what it means. That's curiosity. You want to understand what's going on with the language. That's curiosity. But also, you want to understand what I'm saying right now. You're kind of interested. You're like, Rich, when are you going to talk about setting goals? Get to the point. I want to know about setting goals. That curiosity motivates you to listen and understand what I'm saying. So it's a very useful feature of motivation in language learning. Always look for your curiosity. When you feel curious about something in a language, go for it. Use your curiosity to guide your learning. Often people will say, what vocabulary should I learn first? Or what order should I learn vocabulary in? How do I know what phrases to learn? My response to that is the most important or the most useful way to guide that is to go where your curiosity goes. Yes, of course, we want to learn about which words are more frequent and so on. But really, that's a secondary concern. Curiosity should be right up there. When you feel curious about something, that's a really good indicator that that is where you want to go with your learning. And Bing Ducks just turned up to say Happy New Year. No, that was a comment about how long it takes to go from beginner to advanced learning languages. 1,200 hours. Sylvia says, I wouldn't say that elders have less aptitude for learning languages, rather than aptitude. Interest is what declines. There are definitely changes in the brain as we get older, and some of those changes do make it more challenging to learn languages. That is a fact. However, it's certainly not impossible to learn languages when you're older, and in fact, it may not be as difficult as some people think. We have some testimony to that right here today in the chat. There's at least one person in the chat who has learned English very rapidly in retirement and is doing very well with it. So, of course, it is possible, but there are challenges. I'm not going to talk more about that right now. I have talked about that quite recently. You can find the classes on how age affects learning and also the class on the neurocognitive models of language. Let's move on to the next point. Resilience. There is no doubt that as you're learning languages, at times you'll be frustrated. Frustration is going to come up. It can be very frustrating being a language learner, particularly when we reach the infamous intermediate plateau, which is a time when you get to around B1, high A2, low B1 level, and you can speak, but it takes so much effort, and we can get a lot of frustration at that point. So we need to have resilience. We need to know that time will happen and you can get through it. And many people in the chat will tell you they have gone through that. And even later on, there'll be times when you're frustrated. Very advanced learners can get frustrated. Native speakers can get frustrated when they're unable to express themselves clearly. So of course that's going to happen to language learners. Resilience is necessary. Resilience is part of persistence. Persistence is the idea that we carry on going even when there is difficulty. However, we're going to counter this with optimism. And I'm going to give you a reason to be optimistic in just a moment. I've spoke about habits, and we're going to focus on that idea of making language learning into a habit. Because if we have a habit which contributes to our language learning, then success is only a matter of time. In fact, success is guaranteed as long as we have that habit. So we're going to be optimistic. We're going to know that with time, we will reach our goals. It will happen. Everyone can do it. And because it's the new year, we're going to set goals and measure progress. And we're going to focus on setting habit-style goals. So, goals that encourage us to form these positive habits, which will help us to learn a language. All right. So let's talk about goals. This is not the main section of the class, but I just want to comment a little bit about setting goals. We have talked about this before, maybe you can remember, but the idea with goals is to make your goals smart. What does that mean, folks? SMART. SMART is an acronym. An acronym means a word where each letter stands for another word. So SMART, each letter stands for another word. And what are each of those words? Can you remember? I'll talk about that at the end of class. Fluent English with Me said, what's your goal for 2025? Fluent English with Me says, I forgot. I'll start you off. Number one is specific. So by specific, we're not going to say, I will be healthier. That's not a good goal. Because what do you, like, that could be losing weight, more muscle, eating better, breathing fresher, drinking water without fluoride. We want it to be specific. So we could say this, I will lose weight. So that's specific now. We're saying I'm going to reduce my fat. I will reduce my body fat. Okay, that's specific. Let's make it into language learning rather than body fat. I will improve my vocabulary. My English vocabulary. That's quite specific. We could make it more specific. Let's say we make it my polite English vocabulary. Okay, great. It's still not a great goal though. We've still got M-A-R-T. So the second one here, M, is measurable. Measurable means we can say, yes, it's done, or no, it isn't done. Now, if I say, I will improve my polite English vocabulary, how do I know if I do that or not? What does it really mean? Like, is that learning one word a day, one word a week, one word a year? How do I say, yes, it's done, or no, it isn't? So we need something else, don't we? We need something like, I will learn 50 new phrases a day. I will learn 50 new polite English phrases a day. Okay, that's measurable. I know if I've learned 50 new polite English phrases a day. I can measure it. I can say, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And of course, the reason for that is because 50 is too much. And that gets us to A, which is that it must be achievable. 50 new polite English phrases a day is not achievable. It's too much. So let's change it. I will. Let's put I will note down 5 new polite English phrases. Okay. That's achievable, right? You can note down 5 new polite English phrases. So, decent start. Still not perfect. The fourth one is relevant, and I always wish it started with the R. However, if it started with the R, then the acronym would be RUSMT, and that's not as easy to remember as SMART. But relevant really just means that your goal actually makes sense for what you want. So relevance really relates to this first one. I said, I will be healthier. Well, being healthier doesn't relate directly to learning English. It could, but not directly. So it's not very relevant. So we can skip over that one because, yes, I will note down 5 new polite English phrases is relevant. Now, what about the T? Did anyone get it? Yes, Pavia got it. Well done, Pavia. It's time-bound. We can just remember it with time, but the idea is time-bound. Time-bound means there is a time limit or constraint. In other words, there is some time-based restriction. Because I will note down 5 new polite English phrases. Well, when? And how often? These are the questions that we ask. When? Or how often? That's what we want to ask with time bound. So how about this? I will note down 5 new polite English phrases every week in 2025. I will note down 5 new polite English phrases every week in 2025. Well, that to me looks like quite a nice language learning goal. A smart language learning goal. Also, because we have this idea of it being every week, it encourages the idea of building this habit. So maybe we get to the end of our week on Friday, we get to our 4 o'clock English study, and the first thing we do is note down the 5 polite English phrases that we have found, learned, or heard this week. And we do that every week for a year, which would, in fact, give us quite a lot of polite English phrases. I'm now thinking that 5 polite English phrases is perhaps a little too much. It's worthwhile thinking quite a lot about your goals in that way. Do we really want to have 250 English phrases, polite English phrases from the year 2025? Or is that maybe a little bit too specific? Well, I'll leave that with you. So this is the idea of SMART goals, and we are going to think about that more. But let's come away from goal setting for a moment and let's talk about this idea of habits. Because as I said, learning a language is important. You have to play the long game. And habits are the way to do that. Building ways into your life that you regularly practice and study English. One of those ways is watching these classes on YouTube. And by the way, if you're doing that, make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe. It's super important, especially hitting subscribe. If you've never hit subscribe before, hit it now. You don't need to pay anything. I know a lot of people from the older generation don't realize exactly what hitting subscribe on YouTube means. What it really means is that YouTube will tell you when there are new classes on the channel. That's all. So let's talk about habits. How do we make effective habits? There's a great book about this called Atomic Habits, and I've talked about it before. We're going to reflect on that now. And this book is all about how to create habits in your life, successful habits. So the first thing that the book talks about is making it obvious. Making it obvious is about our reminders. In other words, we need to have something which we see or hear or which comes up, which reminds us about our habit or the habit we want to create. For example, when you get a notification about a new class on YouTube, that's like a reminder about your language learning habit. So, some ideas for this. Set up a study area. Put something in there which reminds you to learn English. Doesn't need to be anything special. Maybe a flag, maybe a course book, maybe it's your vocabulary notebook. There are lots of things in my house now which remind me about God. And so the religious part of my life has a lot of reinforcement in this way, that I'll see things and then maybe I'll pray. And then praying becomes a habit because I walk around my house and I see many things which remind me about that. And the same thing can apply to anything you want to make a habit. If you wanted to become fitter by doing more exercise, then you just need those reminders. The poster, the sport poster, your exercise equipment in the corner, your sports clothes folded and on top of your cabinet where you can see them. The point is, we don't hide them away, but we bring them out where we can see them and they become a reminder. Also, more direct reminders like putting reminders in your phone, changing your desktop to be related to English learning, marking your study times in your calendar and so on. So the first point here, we want it to be obvious, visual, all around us, reminding us about our commitment to this habit of learning English. So Fluent English with Me says, whenever I see any kind of notebook, it reminds me of studying. And that could be a positive thing. However, if you have a negative association with studying, perhaps using a notebook is not the way for you to go. It's your choice. You could have something else. Let's move on to the next point. We need to make it attractive. So, this actually relates to the comment by Fluent English with Me, because we might have something that's obvious, but we don't actually want to do it. So, for example, if I live next door to Mount Everest, a giant mountain, well, and I have the goal of climbing the mountain, well, the reminder is there. I can see the mountain. However, maybe it's not very attractive to me. It's cold, it's difficult, and I'm lazy. So having the obvious reminder of the mountain outside my window might not actually encourage me to do it. Because actually maybe the mountain looks a bit scary to me. And I don't really want to do that. So, just like with language learning, maybe the notebook seems a bit too much like a classroom, boring. Maybe you have some negative memories learning in that way. So that, in that case, a notebook might not be the right solution for you. We need something which is attractive. The key rule that I'll give you here about making things attractive is to make it fun. Make it fun. So maybe that means you don't buy the grammar book with the boring cover and the small text that's difficult to read, but you buy the one with the nice pictures and colours. When you're reading in English, you don't read the thing that you don't want to read, but instead you read something you do want to read. Maybe it means that you watch Prof. Rich on YouTube, if you find these classes fun, for example. It can also mean rewards, like ice cream. I'm serious about that. I know it seems silly, but okay. You might feel a bit guilty about your ice cream. Or if I eat ice cream, I'm supposed to be on a diet. Well, okay. How about you do an hour of English study and then you eat your ice cream? Then you can feel okay about it. Well, I ate some ice cream, but hey, I studied English for an hour. And also then, if you do that over time, you create what we call a habit stack, where you have your sort of habit that you're resistant to becomes linked to these more positive rewards that come afterwards. And that's a real thing, by the way. I would like to say that every time I go to church, I do it because of my dedication to God. But honestly, I confess to you, that's not true. Many times, I can be motivated by other things, which actually are kind of selfish in that respect. But we're humans, and that's how we are. And one of those things is the coffee. I love drinking coffee after church. And my church serves a wonderful coffee after the sermon. And I look forward to that. So no matter what, I'm going to go and have that coffee. And it becomes just part of the stack, the habit stack of doing something. We can also talk about social rewards. In fact, being social is often intrinsically rewarding, which is one of the main rationales for the communicative language teaching method. So, in other words, chatting with new people or chatting with friends is actually in itself fun. And that's one of the reasons why communicative language teaching works. We put people together in a room, they chat together, and it's intrinsically enjoyable. It's part of the learning process. So this idea of putting fun into these habits, that's what we're talking about here, putting fun into it. Video games in English, fun things in English. That's the idea. And by the way, we can put other elements to this. Get some nice plants for your study area. Prepare your classical music playlist. Have your favorite cup of coffee ready for when you sit down to study. These are very real things that can really help. I'm always chatting with other people from around the world. Is that Gus? That's, of course, one of the great things about the internet. There are many online communities you can go to speak English to other people. And often there are embedded social rewards in those activities. So they also can be intrinsically fun. All right, so we had the idea of obvious and attractive. And the next one is make it easy. Make it easy. You want the activity that you're trying to make into a habit, you want that activity to be as easy as possible. So, don't put any barriers in the way. Your books are on your desk and ready. Your desk is organized. Your comfy chair is in position. Don't keep your English studying material stored away in a chest, in a cupboard, in the attic. If you do that, that's going to create a problem. That's going to make it difficult to make this into a habit. You want to make everything as easy as possible. Get rid of the obstacles before you study. Maybe the day before. Get everything ready the day before. So, okay, Friday is English studying day. That means on Thursday, I make sure that everything is ready for when I study English tomorrow. And of course, you can apply this to exercise and other habits you're trying to create. If you want to start a habit of playing tennis every Wednesday, then on Tuesday, you get your tennis clothes and the racket ready, you get your court booked, and you make it as easy as possible to get yourself from home to the tennis court ready to play tennis. Get rid of the obstacles, because those obstacles become massive when you don't want to do something. Just having to open a drawer and get your notebook out can be a very difficult task when you feel resistant to doing something. So we want to make it easy. And by the way, this also means don't over-challenge yourself. Challenge can be fun, but often challenge takes a lot of mental energy. And when we're making a habit, that's a bad thing. So if we want to create the habit of reading English 30 minutes twice a week, we want to read a book that's easy. Otherwise, the difficulty of reading will become an obstacle to our habit. Habits are better made when the action that we repeat is easy. The worst habits that we have, like smoking, drinking, sleeping too much, they're very easy. In fact, the worst habits we have are easy, attractive, and obvious. Like at Christmas, when we have the chocolates. The chocolates are there. They're obvious. They're easy to take. They're attractive because they taste nice. And before you know it, we've eaten all the chocolate. And then we have a habit of eating chocolate. This is actually why bad habits are so difficult to quit, because they have these elements. So let's make it easy. We're not going to learn 10 new words a day. We'll learn 2 new words a day. Can you do that? In fact, not even learn, just study 2 words a day. Or make a note of 2 new words in English a day in your vocabulary notebook. Make it easy. Interesting question. Fluent English with me says, how long should we sleep? I think that's individual. One thing I would say about that is sometimes I feel better after 6 hours sleep than 9 hours sleep. In fact, I almost never feel good after 9 hours sleep. I normally feel bad. That's just me. Okay, so make it easy. Make it satisfying. Have you ever played a mobile game? Have you ever used a social media application? The design of those games and apps is targeted towards your satisfaction. The most popular mobile games are so satisfying. Every time you click something, it has this nice click sound, and the icon kind of does a little thing when you click it. Everything about it's so satisfying. It's rewarding you. That's why they're addictive. They're so satisfying. So how do we make our language learning satisfying? Well, measure your progress in a way that you encourage a feeling of accomplishment. In other words, as you go, you're achieving things. One way of doing that, of course, is something like a grammar book, like English in Use, where you can go through the chapters and complete the chapters and get a sense of satisfaction and completion as you go through the chapters, completing them. Another way is giving yourself some sort of reward as you go. And this can also be related to the environment which you study in. I talked before about the comfy chair, the classical music, the plants. When I was studying philosophy in university, I used to love sitting down with a black coffee. I just love the idea of it. Like I was a philosopher. It was silly, really. I was young. Although I'm still silly now. But I used to sit there with my black coffee and my cigarette. Reading Jean-Paul Sartre, Being a Nothingness. That was very satisfying. And those philosophy books are horrible, by the way. Being a Nothingness is a terrible book. Sorry, Jean-Paul. But it is. However, that whole scene made it very satisfying. It was part of the habit building process. And so I quite regularly did that while I was studying in that way. Quite regularly studied philosophy. And so we want to bring this satisfaction into our language learning, into learning English. There are apps like Duolingo. I think most of you here in chat are probably beyond that, but they can help. We can also bring our interests into our study. If you're interested in cooking, bring your cooking into your English learning, because cooking brings you a sense of satisfaction anyway. So we can bring that sense of achievement into your English learning. We can join an English-speaking cooking class. And by the way, English-speaking cooking class doesn't mean you have to learn how to cook English food. Which, of course, has a terrible reputation worldwide. So when we combine those elements, which are making it obvious, making it attractive, making it easy, and making it satisfying, then we encourage the creation of habit. And when we make several habits, these arrows are going the wrong way. When we make several habits, habits become our identity. Think about that for a moment. Fluent English with Me says, maybe I'll imagine myself as Shakespeare while learning English. I encourage that attitude. I used to imagine myself as Ian Brown when I was learning to play guitar, even though Ian Brown isn't a guitarist. But he was the singer from the Stone Roses. I absolutely had those images, and it helped. So yeah, I do encourage that. Identity is part of this. And when something becomes our identity, it becomes very strong. We really set ourselves up for success. So, as English learning and English speaking becomes your identity, the whole process and habits and everything that's happening around you solidifies in a way that you don't need to worry so much about, will I arrive? In fact, at that point, you will arrive. Whatever your goal is, you'll get there with English. It's only a matter of time. And that's the situation that we want. Because there are people who give up. And that's really what I'm trying to avoid today. In fact, the whole class today has really been about becoming a learner who does succeed over time. Let's have a little bit of reflection. You can see on the left side of the screen there, you can see on the left side of the screen the summary of what we talked about today. So I'd like you guys in the chat just to reflect on that. Reflect on the class today. Which parts of the class did you find most useful? And what resonated most with you from today's class? Type your answers in the chat. And in just a moment, we'll move on to questions. Internet One says tick, question mark. The tick is this symbol. The Americans call it a check mark. And Internet One says, actually, I don't know what my goal is. That can be an issue. What is your goal? Why are you learning English? What do you want? Fluent English with Me says, I liked the SMART strategy. So what did you like about the SMART strategy? By the way, I have a whole class on the making SMART goals. If you do a YouTube search for Smart Goals Prof Rich or Smart Goals Professor Rich, you'll find it. We did a whole class on that. I think it's great. It's a great way of making goals. So the SMART goals, what does it stand for? So Manuel Gordillo coming in with some goals not necessarily related to English learning. He says, keep alive and kicking, traveling, get away from it all from time to time, learning languages and doing exercise. Sounds good, Manuel. Elizabeth Calfour says, "Hi, Prof. Rich. I'm glad to listen to you again. It's so interesting and important to me, this class. I think I'm going to learn a lot." I'm not sure if you're at the start or the end, Elizabeth. Maybe you're watching the start of the class right now. But if you enjoyed today's class, I highly recommend having a look at my lesson on SMART goals and also my lesson on atomic habits, where we go into quite some detail about this topic. Pallavi's just showed up to say hello, everyone. Happy New Year. And I think on that note, I can wish you all a Happy New Year, wherever you are in the world. I don't know if there's anywhere in the world where the New Year's already started. But anyway, I do wish you all a lovely Happy New Year. Happy 2025. I do feel like the past decade has been a difficult decade for the world. And I think it's about time things started to get better. So let's hope that 2025 is the beginning of that. So Happy New Year to everyone. You can, of course, download the notes from today's class, as always, and they are now available in the chat, and in just a moment, they will be available down below the video. As soon as I find the edit button. Did I actually make it so you can... Yeah. So you can download those notes right now. And we're now on to question time. If you have any questions about today's class, you can type those in the chat right now. I'll be back in just a moment. The postman arrived with something, and I'm going to get it. So while I'm away from the screen, ask your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. Pallavi says, what about your goals? You know, embarrassingly, Pallavi, I've been busy with my masters and preparing this class. I haven't actually sat down and thought about my goals yet, but I will do. It's a bit of a ritual for me on New Year's Eve to think about my goals and plan them out. So I will be doing that in just a moment. As I was baptized in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit this year, then Christianity will definitely be involved in my goals. I will make it. That's my one sneeze for the stream. You notice every stream I sneeze like one time. I will make it my number one goal, but who knows if I will be enabled to fulfill that goal. As for other goals, I do have goals related to my masters. I have goals related to my family. I have goals related to the channel. So we'll be doing that. Manuel says, dear teacher and friends, senor Nolan, I have to go. Happy New Year. Feliz Año Nuevo. See you later, Manuel. Happy New Year, Alex. Wow, it's already the second hour of 2025 and the Russian Far East. Oh, you're in the Far East, Alex. That's so cool. That's so cool, Alex. I'm fascinated by that area, like Vladivostok and all that stuff, because I know nothing about it. You know, I spent quite a lot of time looking at pictures of Vladivostok. I would love to go. Obviously not right now. It's kind of difficult to travel. Well, I think we can travel to Russia, but it's a tense situation. But I think we're all hoping and praying that that terrible war will be over soon. And then I would love to go to the Far East of Russia. Lavi says, I want to share my goals with you. I'll be healthy this year. I'll study harder this year, learn English more, listen to my mind more than my heart. Pallavi. Those are lofty goals indeed. Can we apply SMART to those goals, Pallavi? I think you joined the stream late, but we talked again about SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So, relevant, I think we can assume they are relevant, so that's okay. Tick. Specific. I'll be healthy this year. You need to be specific. What does that mean, Pallavi? For you. You don't have to say, but do you mean diet? Do you mean smoking? Are you smoking 40 cigarettes a day? I know you're not. I'm joking. But what do you mean by healthy? Diet? Let's be specific. Do you want to eat green vegetables every day? Overall healthy is not specific. We need it to be specific. Overall healthy is the opposite of specific. Hi, Mark. What are the 6 things you expect from your wife this new year? Okay, first of all, who's Mark? Sylvia says, you know how much I love your lessons, but do you really think reading Shakespeare will help us speak real English? Neither Shakespeare nor Chaucer use expressions such as bubbling up. You know, I'm not an English literary expert. I'm not an expert in English literature. I'm an English language teacher. And Shakespeare is really literature. And so's the other guy. I can't even say his name because I haven't studied English literature. But I know he's like a poet or something. I would say no, but if you're interested, why not? Shakespeare is fun if Shakespeare is fun. And if Shakespeare is fun, then learn Shakespeare. But is it the best thing? No. And should everyone do it? No. I've never recommended Shakespeare to any of my students, ever. I don't want to say don't do it, because if you're interested, why not? More than Shakespeare, I think that the interest in Shakespeare could be a way to learn. Like, we could say this about the Bible, right? Let's do it. Let's do it. I've wanted to do this for a while. Let's do it. So there's a famous Bible verse, right? Which is John 3:16. And John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." Now, the language of this is not necessarily the kind of natural language that people use in conversation. However, if we're interested, for my Christian viewers or people just interested in Christianity, we can use this passage as an object of our interest, and we can use English to talk about it. And by doing that, we learn English. Not necessarily the direct English from this passage, from this verse, but we learn English through our communication and interaction. And our interest motivates that. So, applying that to Shakespeare, by studying Shakespeare, you can learn English not necessarily from Shakespeare, but from the action of studying Shakespeare. And even also by contrasting the things which seem strange to us in the English here, we can also learn things. Like this idea of starting with for. That's quite unusual in modern English, even though my writing here is partly from a modern translation of the Bible. For God so loved the world. I mean, in modern English, we'd probably say, God loved the world so much, rather than for God so loved the world. So we could talk about the modern translations of this. You could do that with Shakespeare as well. Wherefore art thou, Romeo? Like, how do we say that in modern English? We say, where are you, Romeo? And that's kind of fun and interesting, right? Like translating Shakespeare into modern English. And there are a few words here as well that might be interesting, just like with Shakespeare, okay? Like perish. Perish is an interesting one, isn't it? What does perish mean? So I think that we can use things which don't necessarily have the kind of English we want to speak, but we can still use them as themes for our learning. For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. There's so much you could say about this. This idea of his one and only Son is very interesting because there's it's a fundamental part of Christianity that God is our Father. By becoming Christian, we pray to our Father, and we are the sons and daughters of God. And yet here we have the idea of his one and only Son, which seemingly contradicts that. part of the reason for that is because of the translation. When we say his one and only son, we actually mean coming directly from him and fully being him in a person, which is different than us as sons and daughters of God, as his creation in his image. And in English, we can't express that very well, which is why we have this phrase, his one and only son. Having those kinds of discussions, if that's interesting to you, you'll learn English through the discussion. So anyway, I think that gives you the idea about how Shakespeare could be a useful object of your study, even if you don't want to speak like Shakespeare. Alex says there are many English translations of the Bible. Yeah, there are. And I mean, comparing them can be interesting as well, right? Like, the KJV, which was the most popular English translation in the world, it's heavily criticized because there are verses which give the wrong idea and which we consider to be bad translations now. But the KJV has some great things as well. Like, I love the behold. It's such a powerful word. And if you get a modern translation of the Bible, like the New International Version, which is the version that my church uses, the New International Version of the Bible, and is highly recommended by many Protestants, the New International Version, you don't have behold. It doesn't say behold, right? But in the KJV, you have behold. And behold is like, really, it just means like, look at this. Look at this, right? But something about the word behold, it's so powerful. Behold. It's like, not only look at this, it's like, look at this great thing, right? And so I quite like parts of the King James Version, actually. I think they do get a better sense of the original meaning. Okay, let's move on. Daisy says, I have only one goal, being healthy. I can accomplish anything as long as I'm healthy. Health is super important, Daisy. No doubt about that. And my number one recommendation is fresh vegetables and meat and fish. Fresh. Don't get the stuff in the package. If it comes in a package, look at the ingredients. And if there are more than 3 ingredients, then find something else. When you buy fish, it should contain fish and nothing else. If it contains ascorbic acid or monosodium glutamate or something like that, then maybe look for something else that's just fish. Nicholas says, correct or incorrect? How far did he study? Up to or until what class did he study? Up to which grade did he study? He studied up to until the 10th grade. All of those sound correct, but unnatural. How far did he study? Not so much, though. But you could say it. It's not grammatically wrong. What I'll do, Nicholas, is I'll just tell you the ways I would say those things. So, I would say, how long did he study for number one? I would say which grade did he study until or till? I would say the same for number 3, because that's the same thing. And he studied until or till the 10th grade. So they're the natural ways that I would say those things. Not that they are grammatically incorrect, but that's what I'd say. Internet One says, I want to lose 25 kilograms. You can do it. In 2019, I weighed 109 kilograms, and I now weigh 82 kilograms. So I can testify that that is possible. And I would say the best thing is fresh vegetables, meat, and fish. You can eat as much as you want, but it has to be fresh vegetables, meat, and fish. You can put salt on it. You can use olive oil. That's okay. But you get the fresh. And then see what happens. And yeah, some exercise will help as well, right? And by the way, I'm not a doctor. But yeah, use fresh ingredients. Fresh ingredients. Don't get the stuff with the preservatives and chemicals. They are the problem. They're so addictive. They're so addictive. You eat them and it just tastes so good. You know, those little packets of crisps with all the monosodium glutamate. Right? When you eat them, but they're so bad for you and they're so addictive. Stay away from that stuff. Get some fresh salmon, get some broccoli, get some mushrooms, fry them up with olive oil. There's your lunch. And you'll see. You get full. You feel good. You start to lose weight. But hey, I'm making it sound easy. It's not easy at all. It's very difficult. Losing weight is not easy. It's not easy. Can we make that into a SMART goal as well? Like, how about in 2025, I will lose 2.5 kilograms per month. Can you do that? Shalom and greetings from Germany, says Fofo Biza. May your lives be filled with health, joy, and serenity, says Sylvia. Lo and behold. Lo and behold is an expression, but yes, it's from that. No, the KJV, it's the King James Version Bible. It's very famous. It's the most famous version of the Bible in English. Enrique Gonzalez says, hello, Prof. Ridge. Hello to all of the fans of PR. My very best wishes for you all from Mexico. PR? PR. Oh, Prof. Rich. It's me. By the way, if anyone out there is a video editor who wants to collect like parts of the streams and make them into shorts for YouTube, let me know. You might have to work for free to start with. But I promise I'll give you a job if the channel becomes profitable. Yeah, up to can be. I mean, yeah, it can be. I would say I studied up to like that, but okay. Yeah, I wouldn't put it as one, put it as 2 words. I studied up to the 10th grade. That is grammatically correct. But it's not how I would say it. When do we use up to more? I worked up to dinner time. Yeah, you could. It's not very common though, Nicholas. Like, I worked until dinner time sounds more common to me. It's about that, Sylvia, yeah. So in English, we use stones and pounds. We are, I think, the only country on the planet which uses stones to measure weight. But I use kilograms now because all of the apps and everything online use kilograms. And lots of other things use kilograms, so we use kilograms. Yeah, I mean, ideally you want wild salmon, don't you? But farmed salmon is okay. I mean, the thing is, Alex, I'm comparing this to like KFC and McDonald's, right? Or microwave meals. So compared to McDonald's, farmed salmon is pretty good. But yeah, wild salmon obviously is the best. Yeah, both are okay, Nicholas. In English, we prefer to use what unless there are a small number of known options. Like, here are 3. Which do you want? Here is a list of all the grades. Which did you study till? So notice this comes with the context. Here is a list of all the grades. We prefer to use which when we have the discrete options. So we've got, here are 2 pens, the yellow and the red. Which one do you want? Versus, what colour pen do you want? Yeah, that's good, Sylvia. It's a little bit different, but yeah, I like that. And it's very colloquial, and people say like stuff like that all the time. Like, what have you been up to recently? This is a common question that people ask each other. I've been getting up to all kinds of stuff. So be or get up to, which actually just means do. Do things. Oh, someone did a super chat. When did they do that? Oh, it was Manuel, and he left. Thank you, Manuel. Not only did he leave, he deleted the super chat. So he made a super chat for five euros and then left. And I don't know what the super chat said, but thank you, Manuel. We achieved our goal for the stream. Well done. Does anyone have any other questions? Pepper! Pepper! They've woke up, but they're not coming. We're going to finish, unless there are any questions about English learning, education, or anything from today's stream, or New Year's Eve in general. Oh, look, it's that guy. All right, let's get the cat and say goodbye. Come on, kitty. Who's going to say hello to you? Come on, Ginger. It's Ginger's turn. He's a big boy. Come on, Gigi. Say hello. Hello, everybody. Oh, he's just woken up. Have you just woken up, kitty? You just woken up, kitty? So, this is me and my cat Ginger wishing you all a lovely Happy New Year. May 2025 be a year of achievement, peace, and reverence for the Lord our Creator. May it be filled with happiness and joy and prosperity and peace. Happy New Year, everybody. Have a good one. Like and subscribe. Do enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope to see you on Saturday for our first class of 2025. Bye for now, folks. Catch you later.